As people have been returning to school and activities are moving indoors with the cooler weather, cases have been spiking in countries around the globe. And almost nowhere is doing worse than the United States, where the number of COVID deaths has just hit an astonishing 200,000, far more than any other country in the world. Which really makes you question whether or not failing to do even the bare minimum is an effective strategy to combat the disease. Although I will say this, I truly believe that with this president and the right Sharpie, we can bring that number down to just 2. Now, if you're wondering why the pandemic has been so hard to get under control here in the US, well, take a look at what happened yesterday when one pro-Trump politician tried to make face masks great again.
And at a Trump campaign event yesterday, Ohio's Lieutenant Governor John Husted was booed for suggesting that the audience wear masks.
But if you go into a grocery store where you gotta wear one, all right? Hang on, just listen up. Just listen up. All right, I get it. But if somebody tells you to take it off, you can at least say that you're trying to save the country by wearing one of President Donald Trump's masks, all right? All right.
Wow.
Wow. This crowd booed even when the lieutenant governor was promoting Trump masks. I guess we finally found the limits of MAGA loyalty. Trump can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they don't care, but if he puts on a mask, those people will eat him alive. You know, I really love how these Trump people are the same ones who always talk about liberals getting triggered. Yet when they see a 3-inch piece of cloth, they have a meltdown. No! I would rather be the reason thousands of people die than have cloth on my face. And this poor guy, he reminded me of a guidance counselor at a school. You remember when those counselors would come and try and convince teens to use condoms? Okay, now I know you kids don't think protection is cool, but what if I did a rap about it? Someone drop a beat.
You suck!
Okay, more of an insult than a beat, but I can work with that. It's silly not to rap your willy. But it's not just people at Trump rallies who aren't taking coronavirus as seriously as they should, because apparently the Pentagon also has some pretty messed up priorities.
Breaking within the last half hour, we've learned the Pentagon used $1 billion of taxpayer money meant for masks and swabs to instead make jet engine parts and body armor. That comes out to 1/3 of the pandemic relief approved earlier this year. The Washington Post reporting the CARES Act gave the Pentagon money to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the virus. The Defense Department made the payments, even though health officials believe there are still major funding gaps in responding to the pandemic.
Okay. Either the Pentagon just doesn't give a shit, or they heard that corona is airborne and they took it way too literally. But in the Pentagon's defense, in the defense of the defense, get it? Because it's a thing. In the Pentagon's defense, we've all been there. I mean, who hasn't spent money on stuff that was supposed to go towards something else? You know, like when your mom sent you out to buy milk, but instead you just watered down the milk that was left at home, and then you used the money to buy a pet hamster from the kid down the block who just had a litter. But in the Pentagon's case, people could end up dying instead of just a hamster. Fenwick, I just wanted to say I'm so sorry. I guess I wasn't ready for the responsibility. I'll miss you, buddy. I mean, think about it. America's infrastructure is literally falling apart. Schools are a disaster. Millions of people don't even have basic health care. What's the point of having defense if there's nothing left to defend? The United States spends so much money on weapons, I'm starting to think it would be cheaper just to bribe other countries not to go to war. Like, why does the US need more fighter jets? Coronavirus has killed way more Americans than any terrorist group. I bet right now ISIS is looking at COVID like, damn, I know we said death to America, but you guys are extreme. With all this craziness going on in the world, you probably wish that you could just hop on a plane and take a long flight to an exotic vacation. Well, here's a solution to the first half of that problem.
It may have been the fastest selling flight in Qantas history, a 7-hour trip around Australia, where you don't get off the plane at all. Demand is high. Tickets sold out in just 10 minutes. The date of this flight to nowhere and back is October the 10th, and the plane is a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, one usually reserved for international travel. This time, though, it's a long, local cruise. Flights like these have become more common in recent months. In July, Taipei's Songshan Airport began the first of 3 flights to nowhere, where passengers got on board a plane and it never actually took off. Royal Brunei Airlines did a dine and fly sightseeing tour in August. And Singapore Airlines is reportedly considering a new route as well, to nowhere.
Hold up. So you buy a plane ticket, go to the airport, and then 5 hours later you're at the same airport? Guys, LaGuardia has been offering that for years. Not to mention, this seems like a giant FU to climate change and Greta Thunberg. Right? People were like, look, Greta, we don't want to pollute the sky, but sometimes you have to fly. And now people are like, yeah, I don't have to go anywhere, okay? I just want to watch Big Bang Theory on a really tiny screen. Sheldon is so funny. Wait, is that Sheldon? Yeah, I think it's Sheldon. I mean, I guess the one upside of this is that you don't have to bring any luggage. Although knowing most airlines, they'll still figure out a way to lose your luggage anyway. But I don't get it. I left my luggage at home. I didn't bring luggage. Yes, I understand, sir. And now that luggage is somehow in Malaysia. We'll give you a $25 voucher to buy yourself an outfit, and we'll call you when the bags arrive, okay? But flying is only part of the air travel experience, which is why Leo Devlin has a new service just for you.
Did the coronavirus cancel your summer vacation? You were gonna see the world. Now you're stuck at home seeing your ugly ass kids. Well, pack your bags, because guess what? You can't go to a tropical resort, but you can still go to the airport. Introducing Leo Devlin's Airport at Home. That's right. I'll give you all the stress, frustration, and boredom of flying in your house. I'll make your crib feel like you was at LaGuardia. I'll inspect your suitcase and throw half of it out. No shirts over 3 ounces. Is that shampoo? Man, give me that, little boy. You ain't blowing up my plane. Or stop by the cafe, where I'll give you the world's soggiest sandwich. That'll be $40. I'll take up every outlet so you can't charge your phone. And what's that on your TV? Netflix? Nope. Now it's CNN on mute. And when you've had enough, I'll give you back your suitcase with a weird wet spot on it. Could be blood. Order now, and I'll let in some random birds to fly around your ceiling all day. It ain't but $85. You can get that from your mama.
Leo Devlin Airport at Home in the center of Baba Bang. Leo Devlin Airport at Home in the center of Baba Bang.
Exit 120 by the fairgrounds. Barbering Institute temporarily closed due to COVID.
Before I ask you about us, I'm going to try, as we do in African culture, and ask you about you. I know that you had surgery on your vocal cords, something I'm very sensitive to because I too had polyps and I had to get them surgically removed. How are you and how is your voice?
I'm actually fine, Trevor. Thank you for asking. You know, I should have had this done literally months ago. I had kind of strained my voice. I had actually an upper respiratory infection and had a little tracheitis. Usually you rest and let it go away, but that's when things started to explode with COVID-19. And I was literally constantly, and I say not hyperbole, 17, 18 hours a day talking to the point where I just strained it and strained it and strained it. And then I realized my voice was gravelly and I could not get it back to normal. But the surgery was very successful. They removed the benign polyp, and now this is my regular voice. So I joke around, and instead of sounding like Vito Corleone from The Godfather, I sound like Tony Fauci from the NIH.
As somebody who's had the surgery, I know how horrible it can be, so I'm glad that you have your voice back. And there are a few people who need their voices more than you do, especially considering what's going on right now, not just in America, but around the world. I spoke to you 6 months ago. The country saw you every day. We had a routine. We wake up, we see Dr. Fauci, he gives us an update, we know what we're doing and what we're not doing. Then you disappeared, and now I have to rely on Facebook to know how to not fight the virus or fight the virus. So where have you been?
You know, there's been a change in the intensity with which the coronavirus task force, the White House coronavirus task force, has been involved. It used to be on a daily basis when we were talking about the public health issues. Then there was kind of a switch in a pivoting that was focusing mostly on opening the economy and opening the country, which is a good thing. So we're not meeting as frequently. And you remember, we used to have like a press conference every single day.
Oh, I remember.
And they decided that they were going to pull back and have mostly the president give the press conference. And then, you know, we are sometimes on the media, sometimes not. It's kind of erratic. Like on the classic media, you might see me a couple of days in a row and then I'm off for a while. And it's just a question of whether they have a message that they want out. And if it's the message that they want out at that particular day, then you might go out. If not, you don't go out. And that's the reason why I value the opportunity to speak with you and to others, because I think we can get the public health measure that I really feel is very important for the health of the American public, to be able to say it in a way that's received by the people who really would benefit from it.
Yeah, because I'm not going to lie to you, Dr. Fauci. Right now, it feels like everyone is making this up as they go along, because it doesn't feel like the public has a solid source from which to deal with. You know, you'll hear one thing from the CDC, then another thing from the CDC. We don't know when it gets updated or not. Then the director of the CDC says something. Then the president contradicts him. Then we hear that this is happening with masks or not masks. We hear that this is happening with vaccines or not with vaccines. Is there a reason there isn't a centralized source of information like there is in many other countries around the world?
Well, you know, Trevor, that's a difficult question to give a satisfactory explanation for, because as a matter of fact, there has been switches in how the messages have gone out. And you're right. From a research and public health standpoint, I try my best, and I think I'm successful in giving a consistent message as often as I can get the message out, something that is just based on the scientific data, based on evidence, which is something that is really very important. One of the things that I think gets in the way is that we are in such a divisive state in society that it tends to get politicized. It's almost one side versus the other. And the thing that I keep saying, and I'll say it very briefly now because I think it's important, is that everybody feels we need to open the economy, to get people back to work, to get people back to school. But the public health messages that we've given and that you've heard me give back months ago when we used to have the press conferences from the White House is that public health measures should be more of a gateway and a pathway to opening the country as opposed to the obstacle to opening the country. So what has evolved now is that almost people take sides, like wearing a mask or not is a political statement. And that's really very unfortunate, totally unfortunate, because this is a purely public health issue. It should not be one against the other. And I think the confused messages that you're alluding to correctly and appropriately is that you don't have a single message when messages get sort of thrown into political buckets. And that's something that I really wish that, conversations like you and I are having now would dispel that and put that aside and say, for goodness sakes, I've never had any political ideology that I've made public. I'm really just talking to you about public health. When I'm telling you wear a mask, keep social distancing, avoid crowds, wash your hands, do things outdoors more than indoors, there's nothing political about that. That's a public health message that we know works, because every time groups of people have done that in situations where you've had a surge of infections, the surge has come around and come down. So we have within our capability the ability to turn this around.
If you were to rate America's response to the coronavirus on a scale of 1 to 10, as an epidemiologist, where do you rate it?
Well, it's very interesting because if you look at the numbers, Trevor, the numbers are telling. We have in this country now, close to 200,000 deaths. We have 6 million plus infections. You can't look at that and say that's terrific, But if you look at the country, there are parts of the country that have done well, that are doing well. Right now, what I'm seeing is that some of the numbers are coming down. What I'm concerned about is that our baseline is still very, very high, Trevor. It's like it never got below 20,000 new cases a day. When we tried to open up the economy, as it were, some states jumped ahead of the guidelines. Some people didn't listen to what the governors and what the mayors were saying. And remember, we went way up to 70,000. And now we're coming back down to 30 or 40,000. But the thing I'm concerned about is that as you go into the fall and winter, and more things will have to be done indoors rather than outdoors, you want to start off with the lowest possible baseline that you could have. So in the next several weeks, what I would love to see is the country pulling together as a whole to try and get that baseline down so that when we go into the winter and the fall, and we perhaps get hit with a flu season, I hope that people will get their flu vaccines, that we're not struggling at a disadvantage, because you have a disadvantage when there's community spread and you have 40,000 new infections each day. That is not a good place to be.
So let me ask you two questions to that. Number one, how do you respond to the people who say, well, the infection rates shouldn't matter, it's only the death rates that should matter, and even then, the death rates are being inflated, and some people are saying people have died from corona, when in fact people are dying with corona, as in they just have corona and they're dying, but it's not corona that causes their death?
I think the 200,000 deaths that you're talking about, Trevor, are a good reflection of people that likely would not have died if they didn't have this infection. The thing that I think we need to be careful and humble about, in that we don't know everything about this infection, but what we're starting to see right now are a couple of things that are troubling to me. And that is that, first of all, more and more young people you see when you look at it are getting into some significant trouble. Not a lot, not a high percentage, that's true. The other thing is that when people get infected, we're seeing more and more of lingering signs and symptoms, so that when you clear the virus, you may have weeks or months or so in which you're just not quite right. And the final thing is that they've recently done a study that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Cardiology, where people who recovered even from disease that wasn't that severe, when you do MRIs or imaging, sensitive imaging, you can see things like inflammation of the heart. Now, they may not be symptomatic, but we want to make sure that 6 months or a year from now, they don't wind up with unexplained arrhythmias or premature heart attacks or cardiomyopathies. So the situation is not wrapped up about what is the full impact of this, which means we have to take it very seriously, even among people who are obviously in trouble and die. There's other people that we need to be concerned about.